Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Creative Vitality Suite webinar on creative districts as an economic catalyst. This is part of CVSuite's ongoing series of webinars pertaining to data in the arts. I'm Susan Gillespie, the account manager here at WSTAF, the Western States Arts Federation, where we implement policy, programming, and technology solutions for the arts. If you're not aware of Creative Vitality Suite, CVSuite is an online tool that aggregates creative labor market data and includes nonprofit and demographic data all in one online interactive tool. Data is from national sources and can be analyzed at any zip code, county, MSA, or state level. Data from this tool is used by arts administrators, economic development personnel, city planners, and researchers to benchmark, plan, report, and identify areas of the creative economy that may need further development. The data is updated annually and is the most current labor market data available. So we know there is oftentimes confusion about the various data providers to the arts, and we like to try to identify the differences between them. The AEP is American for the Arts report on the economic impact of nonprofit arts and cultural organizations and their audiences. The study is conducted once every 5 years and relies on the participation of partners to administer surveys and gather local nonprofit organization information. The project also conducts audience intercept surveys that seek to identify ways the attendees spend money related to their visit. This information is then run through a model to produce national estimates. The last AEP, which is number 5, was released in 2017. And Data Arts is self-reported survey data at the nonprofit organizational level to convey program activity, financials, and audience attendance for grants. The nonprofit organizations supply the data, and Data Arts produces a modeled report for the organizations. So today we are very excited to introduce 2 executive directors of state arts agencies. First, we are happy to have Margaret Hunt, Executive Director of Colorado Creative Industries, and Karen Hanan, Executive Director of ArtsWA, Washington State's Arts Agency. Both Margaret and Karen bring to this webinar firsthand experience on the creation of creative districts. I will turn it over to Karen, and she will ask the questions to Margaret and will give us her perspectives as well. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you, Susan, and thanks to WSTAF, of course, for doing all it does for the arts in terms of supplying technology solutions to the arts and artists, which we really value. And I can tell you that as a CVSuite user ourselves here in Washington State, we are very thankful for the data and the statistics that the tool provides. It's invaluable in terms of providing a service to our constituents, but also really helping us interpret the creative economy and how it's doing for our state.
Yes, and I'd like to add my thanks to WSTAF for hosting this webinar as well. I'm happy to be here, and I hope everyone on the call finds the conversation we have today useful. And we're happy to answer your questions at the end.
Okay, so I'm going to kick it off with a question for Margaret. This is kind of a basic one, but I know that you and I take the term creative district for granted, but not everybody else, in the world does necessarily. So how do you define the term creative district?
Well, first of all, we use the creative district terminology interchangeably with arts district and cultural district. So we use creative district as an umbrella that encompasses all of those names, if you will. And creative districts, in our definition, are a neighborhood or a community that has a concentration of artists, artisans, and cultural assets. They typically include a mix of uses, including creative businesses like galleries and some light manufacturing, artists, artisans, nonprofit arts organizations, restaurants, culinary arts, coffee shops, housing, performance venues, and in general, community gathering places.
And maybe to add just a little bit to that, here in Washington State, we only just recently passed our legislation, in fact, back in 2017. So we are now developing our program for certifying creative districts. But perhaps a characteristic that we will definitely be emphasizing, already mentioned by Margaret, but it's part of our legislation, is to be the presence of affordable housing and or maker space for artists and creatives within the districts. And, as I said, this is part of our legislation, so therefore a key component as we develop districts in Washington. So, Margaret, how are creative districts the same or different than what we call BIDs, Business Improvement Districts?
Well, our creative districts utilize many different types of organizational structures and tools. I like to say that they have many tools in their tool belt. One of those is a business improvement district, and in some cases a general improvement district, which is slightly different. Business improvement districts collect fees from property owners within the boundary of the district. So the district boundaries are established when the district is creative. And sometimes the creative district is also a business improvement district. Other helpful tools that we find districts are using, and they use many of these, are 501c3 organizations. We've seen 501c4 membership organizations, urban renewal authorities, and Main Street program designations, to name a few.
Thanks, Margaret. Well, again, here in Washington, we're thinking of business improvement districts, but also the creative districts as parallel programs within a community and for communities. So while creative districts and business improvement districts might seem like the same, and there is, of course, much crossover, there are differences. And some of the ones that we recognize here in Washington are that BIDs generally are districts in which businesses are required to pay additional fees or levy tax dollars to help fund projects within the district, pay for things like maintenance or safety improvements. And sometimes a jurisdiction will collect those fees and disperse them to the BID for operating costs. Whereas we anticipate here with our creative districts that those types of fees may be collected in the district, but it's possible also that activities in a creative district will be funded through other means, such as through grants. So BIDs generally focus on a broad cross-section of the business community, while creative districts will benefit the community as a whole, of course, but its focus will tend to be a little narrower in that it centers on the creative economy and on arts and culture.
Could I
Yes,
add one
do.
thing to that? Because that just occurred to me that one of our creative districts was asked to run and manage and operate the BID when the BID was put into place. So we actually have an arts district in Denver that is the operator, also the operator of the Business Improvement District, which is a testimonial to the great management team that they have there.
Thanks, Margaret. Yeah, great addition. So state arts agencies often exist in very different situations. Now, in Colorado, you and your agency work within a state economic development office. To what degree does that office embrace the value of the creative economy development as one of their strategies and the work that you do?
The state of Colorado has identified key industries that they are going after, and they're typically the high-growth, high-wage industries. So the creative economy is embraced by the Economic Development Office here as an important strategy, and creative industries is one of those several targeted industries in the Governor's Office of Economic Development. And I should add that we define creative industries quite broadly to include things such as actors, architects, audio and video technicians, art directors, bookbinding, musicians and singers and songwriters, music directors and composers, even musical instrument designers and manufacturers. Also included in our definition are authors and writers, illustrators, publishers, photographers, dancers, choreographers, and then advertising and promotions professionals such as editors, commercial and industrial designers, sound engineers, interior designers. We see a lot of apparel and fashion designers and manufacturers here, set and exhibit designers, Also, reporters and correspondents, sign makers, public relations specialists, multimedia artists and animators, electronic arts, and culinary arts. So our definition is quite broad.
And just in terms of how you are seen by your state economic development office, when I recently visited you, I had the impression that they really kind of get the work you're doing and its importance to the state.
And I would say, I agree, and I would say that part of that is we've been able to provide them with really great data, and especially from the Creative Vitality Suite, because we can show the growth in jobs and in revenue in the creative sector in a way that's very compelling.
So for those listening, for us here in Washington, we are in fact a standalone agency. We're not housed within any other agency, which has its benefits and also its disadvantages. But nevertheless, as we were developing and moving forward our Creative District program, we focused strongly on the economic advantages and the job-creating abilities of a Creative District in terms of making our case. And this has allowed us to connect very easily with our colleagues in the Department of Commerce and other economic development-focused agencies. And we are actively seeking partnerships with them, and I think that's going to be a very important way of our moving our program forward. And some of the things that we're talking about with the Department of Commerce, for example, will probably involve them working with us to offer business and job training skills to those within a district, and perhaps a partnership around the collection of data for employment numbers and business growth or changes within the district. And this is, of course, where the CVSuite tool will be used extensively. So, Margaret, your background is in economic development. Can you talk a little bit about that and how your current work with creative districts is an extension of that?
Well, it's interesting. I spent the majority of my career in economic development, both in the private sector and in the public sector, before making the shift to the area that I'm passionate about, which is the creative sector. And I see creative districts as both a community development strategy as well as an economic development strategy. My experience in economic development really allows for me to see the potential of creative districts to serve as a means of community organizing and as a catalyst for growing the creative economy and for helping artisans and artists and creative businesses thrive and prosper. So I see this very clear bridge between economic development and the creative sector, particularly, I would say, in rural and small towns. This is an economic development strategy that really works. It has given them a hope and something to that they can realistically wrap their heads around as they're trying to diversify their economies.
For me, I do not come from the same depth of economic development experience as you do, Margaret, but I do come from a background that has made me very familiar with communities of all shapes and sizes around the northwestern U.S. as a result of working directly with their performing arts organizations, with their artists, their arts presenters, and the cities and communities that they all call home. And a frequent topic of conversation I have found over recent years has been around proving the relevance and importance of the arts to the 21st century economy. And this is, again, where data provided by tools like the CVSuite has been really key in helping communities and helping us tell that story in a really powerful and compelling way. So talking about speaking with economic development officials and making the story compelling about the value of developing an area's creative economy, what are the topics of conversation that always come up when you are engaging with economic development officials, Margaret?
Well, one of the first challenges that I see is that people generally have a fairly narrow vision of what is meant by arts and artists and artisans. Our biggest challenge is helping them understand and broaden their definition so that they can understand the economic impact of the greater creative sector. My agency serves both the for-profit as well as the nonprofit creative sector. And the CVSuite gives us specific job classifications and data that's very useful for us in telling that story.
Yeah, in a similar way in Washington, we find that many people still don't really get it, the impact of the creative economy. So I find that when I offer data and stories around the substantial number of jobs in the sector, and facts such as in the creative sector here in Washington State, during the downturn, the last recession, the creative sector jobs turned out were less likely to go away than manufacturing jobs, for example. And officials really sit up and start paying attention when you show them examples like that. And perhaps one more example, in a tiny little city of Raymond, Washington, where they have a population of about 1,600 people, I recently got a call from their mayor who asked me to help in saving their one little theater from his colleagues on the city council who were proposing it to shut it down to save money. So it was clear that his colleagues certainly did not get it. So we talked about the new Creative District designation program and how shutting a theater would take them a step further away from designation rather than moving them towards the possibility of certification. And especially with a theater that was really well attended and well used. I then followed that up by sending him some CVSuite reports that really showed their creative vitality numbers were not only more robust than they thought, but they were ticking up in a number of categories. And I think the data will be new and was new to most of those city council members, but I hope that it will then give the mayor ammunition to help them all start to think a little bit differently going forward, and hopefully will save their theater as well. The power of the creative economy.
You know, I want to add to that too, Karen, that that in my work in community and economic development, one of the greatest challenges that I saw was the turnover in elected officials. They're elected for 2-year terms of office. So we would often do a strategic plan in a community and go back to that community a couple of years later to do an assessment of their progress and find that we were dealing with a whole new group of people. So being able to have this data that goes back 5 years is really a helpful tool when we see this sort of constant re-education that we have to go through with elected officials.
Thank you. So talking about creative districts and their value, what can arts organizations and arts patrons do to help promote the value of a creative district or the idea of a creative district designation with their local economic development officials?
It's really important to get the economic development officials on board and understanding the creative economy. And I think that the community can rally support around the district by having good data and information. So the CVSuite allows us to show trends in job and revenue growth, as I mentioned before, over that period of time. But in addition to the data, there is an important quality of life conversation about interesting places to live and work. A thriving creative district includes unique restaurants, coffee shops, entertainment, and places where the community can gather, which creates a greater sense of community. It's interesting that young people today are deciding where they want to live first, and after they've decided that and moved into the community, then they start to look for work. And so creative communities, creative districts, what we're seeing is an influx of young people who want to live in these interesting places.
And here in Washington, in terms of organizations and individuals using the power of the creative economy to make their case along with the data, one quick example we have is the little city of Ellensburg, which is out on the eastern side of our state or the central part of our state. And we provided them with some data that from the CVSuite tool that they then took to their city council. And this allowed them to make a case for the establishment of a percent for art in their community because people were so surprised by how strong their creative economy was. They really had no idea of its impact, let alone really how fully integrated it was into their community. So rather than giving them 1% for art, they actually ended up with 10% for art. And for a while, they went sort of marching along with 10%. They did eventually cap that at $50,000 annually because I think they realized they've given away quite a bit. But nevertheless, it had transformed the way that the town did business and the town's attitude to the creative economy. And I also think it's really set their particular scene for a future potential creative district certification.
That's really exciting, Karen.
Okay, so let's talk about funding. So where does funding come from to implement the Creative Districts program in Colorado? And how are other states funding creative districts that you know of? And obviously I can talk about Washington, but let's start with Colorado.
Well, first of all, I would say that not all states fund their creative district programs sufficiently. Let me just say that. When we developed our program, it was after analyzing and looking at 14 other states and their creative district programs. And we decided for ourselves that what was important to us is that we create our own best standard, if you will. And so we began to work with a strategic partnership and a financial commitment with the Betcher Foundation, which started as a 3-year commitment of $105,000. Only if the state of Colorado matched it, I have to add. And then they extended it by another 2 years because they were so pleased with the results that we were getting. And it's interesting that the foundation gave the money to a state agency to administer on their behalf. That was a real vote of confidence, I think, in our agency and the work we're doing.
Yeah, so congratulations on that. That is truly a vote of confidence in your work.
And then that money was matched by the state of Colorado, and then each district was required to match our grants to them. So we leveraged the Betcher Foundation money 3-to-1, which they really liked as well. In the beginning, our funding was only for a 3-year period of time, and it was started out at a higher amount, and by the 3rd year was down to a lesser amount because we wanted the districts to be financially independent and sustainable. We did not want them to be dependent upon us for into the future. So now our districts are funded in many ways, and each district is unique. Some of them include line items in their city or town budget. Some of them have line items and also have membership organizations. So the artists and the galleries and the businesses are members of the district and pay a membership fee. Others are nonprofit organizations that receive grants. And we mentioned business improvement districts, which is an ongoing source of revenue, and then local development authorities.
It's a great example to follow. Here in Washington State with our brand new program, we have funding just right now from the state's operating budget. And it's small and it's definitely insufficient to really get the program up and running in a big way, but it is enough to get started. So we are actually following your lead, Margaret, in Colorado. We're exploring possible future partnerships with funders, both corporate and philanthropic. It's early days for us, so nothing is confirmed yet, but the conversations are underway. And Margaret, are you aware of any other states and how they are funding?
I know of, we did some research into a state that was using sales tax revenue within the district. So a certain percentage, I believe it was like 1% of sales tax revenue that was collected in the municipality within the district was going back in to fund the district. I thought that was a really creative approach.
Yeah. What kind of benefits do creative districts generate for themselves and for the state?
Well, I would say first and foremost, it's community pride and self-reliance. Because they become stronger, they have a unified vision. They become more economically vibrant communities. They're, as I mentioned, they're magnets for attracting young talent. We're seeing new businesses move in, and tourism also, which results in sales tax benefits to the community and local government. So when you see motel beds being filled up during arts and cultural events and music festivals, you can see a direct correlation to the impact of the creative district on the town.
So here in Washington, we're up with our program just getting going, but already we have found a tremendous interest in what we're doing. More than a dozen communities checked in with us really within the first couple of months, and they now want to try to work towards their Creative District certification. And of course, they are interested in all the benefits that you just talked about, Margaret, but a couple more benefits I might add would be we've heard that they want to put themselves in a stronger position to recruit creative entrepreneurs and new industries and additional investment. They're also interested in opportunities around affordable housing and live, work, and or makerspace. And they want to set the stage to improve and or redevelop historical community assets. Those are just a couple of extra examples. I'm sure we haven't covered them all. So let's talk about the Creative District application process. What does your process entail in Colorado?
Well, to begin with, we develop a relationship with local leadership when they express interest in the Creative District program. And I have to say that local leadership is the most important part of this process. So any community or neighborhood can call itself creative. They don't need our permission to do that, or they can call themselves an arts district or a creative district, and we encourage them to do that. If they want to be certified, however, by the state of Colorado, they must meet our minimum standards. And if they believe they meet these standards and we agree, then they are invited to apply. After we review their application, we conduct a site visit with a team of reviewers, and I try to get a really diverse group of people from economic development, people from tourism. We've had people from the Department of Transportation. The diversity of the group is really informative because they see things differently, right? And then this team reaches consensus and makes a recommendation to us, which then we take to our Creative Industries Council, which is a group that's appointed by the governor, and they make the final decision based on the recommendation of the site visit team.
Thank you, Margaret. So here in Washington, we are close to finalizing our application process, and we will require the communities to do a lot of work with our guidance before they apply for certification. And we have an exhaustive readiness toolkit and self-assessment tool on our website that communities will use to see where they are in the process. So that's all moving along. But Margaret, talk for a minute about the power of a state certification. And are most communities choosing to come to you to try and get that state certification, or are they choosing to just put up a sign and call themselves a creative district?
Well, that's a really good question, Karen. Most of them want the status of being a certified creative district and the funding that comes along with that. For Colorado, this means that they have a proven concentration of creative sector workers and businesses. Again, we utilize the CVSuite both to validate and to verify that concentration, and often we help them discover creative sector workers that they weren't even aware of. And writers comes to mind because they're often under the radar and they work in isolation. So it's a great discovery process. We provide that CVSuite data to any community that wants to explore creative industries as an economic development strategy. And more local economic development organizations are calling upon us to provide them with that data. I would say that many communities are unaware of the depth and the breadth of their creative assets, and that the CVSuite provides them with that evidence that they want. Next, they must have a sustainable budget. I mentioned good leadership. We want to see local government support, and now we require paid staff.
And in Washington, of course, we're looking to use many of the same criteria as Colorado to certify a community, including a requirement around the use of data to interpret and better track the district's progress. And like you, we'll be asking them to conform to a set of minimum requirements. And then we'll have a list of additional considerations that revolve around things like appropriate zoning. Is it already in place? What about plans for affordable housing and makerspace? Economic and workforce development plans to bolster the creative economy for the region, and so on. After a creative district is certified, how do you move the new district forward into the creative district program, and what are some of the first steps after certification?
By the time a neighborhood or a district becomes certified, they've already had substantial community buy-in. And once certified, we require them to participate in ongoing professional development and networking activities with the other creative districts throughout the state. And it's been sort of an unexpected and delightful outcome that what's been created is a learning community where our creative district leaders can support and help one another solve problems and be more creative in their programming and advancement. So they have a network of people that they can call upon if they run into a roadblock or they have a challenge or they want to promote a particular artist. So we're seeing districts source one another now. And then they can also apply for technical assistance. We've set aside some money in our state funding for a technical assistance fund to help districts implement items in their strategic plan.
So once certified in Washington, we anticipate that we will interact with the districts very regularly, as you do, and we will also ask them to attend, I think, at least one annual convening of all of the districts where we can share successes and challenges as well as opportunities. And we're also going to require regular reporting so we can collect creative economy data around things like income and sales, new business starts, affordable housing projects, and so on. And then I think we'll be also calling on them to be advocates for the program with the legislature and at times with potential funders and stakeholders. And Margaret, I'm curious, how good have your districts become helping you to advocate for the program?
Well, they've really become great allies, and we really encourage them to share their data and their reports that they provide us quarterly with their local elected officials as well as with their state legislators. I think, though, that looking back now, one of the greatest challenges that we had in the beginning was helping districts understand how to collect data. So it just wasn't something that was in their experience because many of our creative district program managers were arts council people or artists. So helping them understand the value of data and how to collect it at the local level is really important.
What are some of the goals that CCI has set for the existing districts?
Well, each district has their own unique set of goals based on local needs and desires, and we strongly support local control and local initiative. But, for example, the goals of a smaller, more rural community, and I think about Mancos and Ridgeway, which are very small communities and very rural communities, they sometimes struggle to find the resources to implement their goals and strategies. So our goals are pretty simple. Let's track some measures of success and metrics: jobs, revenue, tourism. Depending on the district and their local goals, we may look at building vacancies on their main street. We may look at the lack of affordable housing. And so they're really customized to each district. I'm thinking about Trinidad. Trinidad's goal, Trinidad is the city that was built with an infrastructure to accommodate 50,000 people many, many years ago during the mining and railroad boom. And because of mine closures and loss of extractive industry jobs, their population dropped to about 9,400. And their goal is to attract new residents and grow their community, especially their creative sector community. Whereas a small town like Ridgeway, which only has a population of 950 people, they want to preserve their quality of life. And they want to enhance the business opportunities for their creative sector businesses and owners that already live there. It's interesting that with a population of only 950 people, 12% of their residents, at least 12% of their residents are employed in the creative sector.
Yeah, that's quite something. So I think echoing a little bit of what you said, we already know that the goals of each community will likely have things in common, but they also will have great differences. So, for example, a maritime community like Aberdeen will differ from a winemaking, arts, and culinary-focused community like Wenatchee on the east side of the state. So goals will be decided, I think, on an individual basis, as you mentioned, through a rigorous and hopefully inclusive planning process that will involve many stakeholders and participants.
You know, you just brought something else to my mind, which I don't think I mentioned, and that is that in the application process to become certified, we require the district to provide us with a copy of their strategic plan for the district, and we sit down with them and go through it and give them some advice on that. And so just like you mentioned, you know, winemaking and arts and culinary focus in one community, whereas a maritime-driven community, we do the same thing. We look at their strategic plan and help them really focus on their unique cultural assets.
So looking back over the few years that the Creative District program has been really up and running, and most recently in the last few years really thriving, how has Colorado's economic landscape changed in that time?
Well, we've seen tremendous growth in the creative sector. It's been anywhere from 2% to 6%, depending on where the district is located. And of course, the growth is greater in the metropolitan urban center of the state. So it really is. It really varies from district to district, but we aggregate that overall. So I would say it's changed in that in 2012, when the program started, we had 2 certified districts, and 4 years later, we have 21 certified districts. So there's been an incredible excitement about this at the community level, which has also, you know, brought about some growing pains for us. So we've had to adjust and be flexible in administering the program because of that.
So in Washington, we have, of course, not much solid data yet because we're still kind of new, but we have been tracking the creative economy now for quite a few years, charged to do so by Governor Jay Inslee. And, of course, we use the CVSuite data to do that, and we have to make regular presentations around the topic, so we know there's wide interest in the creative economy, and especially given its steady growth, and it has considerable impact on communities statewide, as evidenced by the data. So when we were trying to get our own legislation passed for a Creative Districts program, we did make free and liberal use of your data there in Colorado as a large selling point for helping bring people onto our side. And it was very powerful. So we are hopeful that Washington stats will match Colorado's in terms of future changes to our economic landscape sooner rather than later. So, Margaret, how are you tracking successes in the Creative Districts?
Well, I'll give you an example. I mentioned the city of Trinidad. When we began working with Trinidad and they were certified as a creative district, they had a 68% vacancy rate in their downtown, but they had great bones. They had the highest concentration of historic buildings in the state. That vacancy rate now, 5 years later, is down to 29%, and the vacant buildings are, for the most part, under contract by new investors. So that is one of our greatest successes. We also look at building permits. We look at sales tax revenue, and then we require that the district pull reports from the CVSuite at the zip code level, so that they can benchmark and keep their data consistent and standardized, because there are these other fluctuations in some of the data that they're providing to us. And that enables us to look at the strides made among each district and across all districts. So we can summarize data for a district, but we can also summarize data for what we would consider rural districts, and then summarize data for more urban districts, and then we can aggregate all of it together.
In a similar way in Washington, we will also be asking districts to make use of the CVSuite tool so that we can be comparing apples to apples, and they can obviously use other tools as well, but this way I think we will have a level playing field, as you mentioned. We'll also look at things like numbers of new business starts, maybe population changes in the districts, the number of people engaging in creative activities, and general sort of vibrancy within the district. So lots of ways, I think, to track successes. So you mentioned tourism earlier on. So how has the Creative District program in Colorado partnered with the tourism development efforts there?
Well, we're fortunate in that our tourism office is a sister agency within the Office of Economic Development, and we're all housed together on the same floor in a building. And so, we meet at the coffee pot, and we meet, at the water cooler. And tangibly, the Colorado Office of Tourism now is providing creative districts with regional marketing funds, and I think it's because we have been able to have a consistent conversation with them as this program has rolled out over the last 5 years. So this year, for example, 5 creative districts are collaborating to put together a creative district destination marketing campaign and tour for visitors. So they're going to launch the tour early in the summer of 2018. And it will basically be a driving tour through the mountains of Colorado to visit these creative districts. And these communities are going to be tracking things like increases in retail sales tax as well as lodging tax to measure the effectiveness of the marketing tourism dollars that they received.
Here in Washington, we are definitely planning to work with the Washington Tourism Alliance. This is, of course, still a work in progress. But everybody, I think, is excited about the potential that you describe in terms of potential tours of districts, or, the fact that a certified district is a kind of a guarantee in some ways of vibrancy and activity as some place that will really be attractive to tourists. We're also engaging with the Washington Main Street program, as I know you are in Colorado, to see where those two programs, the Creative District program and Main Street, can really complement each other. Because I think they're different in what we offer, but they're complementary, and they're tools that I think that can enhance what a community can do as opposed to competing with each other. So let's talk about challenges. What challenges have you encountered in implementing your Creative District program?
Well, I think our greatest challenge has been keeping up with the demand for the program. As I mentioned, in 2013, we had 2 certified creative districts in the state. And as I said, 4 years later, there are now 21 certified districts. So that has created quite a demand on us and our staff. We've had to find additional financial resources. We've hired consultants to help us. And we've also modified our staff's job descriptions to accommodate this growth. I would say that another challenge has been establishing the baseline data for job growth. And the CVSuite has been incredibly helpful to us in providing us with the ability to measure both job and revenue growth in the creative district for the past 5 years. And then there's just been the challenge of helping educate community leaders and economic development professionals that this is a true community and economic development strategy.
Yeah, again, here where we are relatively new, let me talk for a minute about the process of getting the legislation passed, which was a challenging process. In and of itself, though, the actual concept of a creative district program was not really very difficult to sell because we had broad bipartisan buy-in, and we had great statistics around the power of districts, thanks again to Colorado. But getting the legislature to assign even modest funds to the program was challenging. They were tempted to pass the legislation and leave us to figure out the money part. Where would we get it from? So that was more difficult. And without a budget to hire a Creative Districts program manager at ArtsWA, I knew that we would not be able to proceed even with enacted legislation. So that was a challenge, and the legislators finally got that message, and they did budget a small amount in support of the program, and as a result, we are now underway.
Well, congratulations.
Okay. Yeah, and thank you. The CCI's efforts also involve affordable housing for artists, and this is very much related to your Creative Districts program. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Sure. This really grew out of a survey that we did of creative districts in 2014 when we learned that we asked, what are your greatest challenges? And one of the things that came out of that was really broadly shared across districts was keeping space and real estate affordable for artisans and artists and creative sector workers. So we met with our partner, the Betcher Foundation, and talked about that. And through the course of many discussions, it led to the establishment of Space to Create Colorado in 2015. It was announced by the governor. It's the first state-driven initiative for affordable housing for artisans and artists and creative sector workers in the nation. I would say that our mission is we've really kind of moved into the real estate development world, if you will. Our mission is to develop permanently affordable housing and workspace, including commercial space, for creative sector workers and artists and arts organizations, so that we can position Colorado as the nation's leader in artist-led community transformation, particularly in rural communities.
This is such an important discussion. I think the whole idea of affordable housing within the districts or across our states in general. So we did bake this into our legislation right from the beginning, that this had to be a focus as we develop and certify districts. So to that end, we are currently in conversation with ArtSpace to explore partnership opportunities around affordable housing in creative districts, and we hope that we'll have some successes there to report very soon. Margaret, you have a list of best practices in your Creative District 2017 annual report. So what are your top 4 takeaways for states considering implementation of creative districts? What are your must-dos, maybe, when implementing a program?
It's a great question, Karen. I would say first that they must have broad-based community buy-in, including their artists, their creative sector business owners, their public officials, their economic development agency, their housing authority, their thought leaders, and the general business community. And this buy-in should include funding, putting their money where their mouth is. Second, they have to prove concentration of creatives. And fortunately, they can use the CVSuite data as one of those tools to do that. I would say third, that they should see the creative district as a tool for community engagement as well as an economic development strategy. And then finally, and most importantly, they need to articulate their authentic and unique story. And for some districts, it's a history of immigrants coming to work in mines and building railroads. For some, it's ranching and farming. For others, it might be history and historic structures. For others, it might be music and music venues and musicians. So, like I say, it really varies, but that authentic, unique story is a very important part of that. And then I would say that I think I mentioned that they have to have a strategic plan with a vision and realistic goals. And we now require that this also include a diverse financial strategy so that they're not reliant on one source of revenue for the district operations. So some districts are now going into real estate development. They're acquiring buildings, or they're making loans to creatives to acquire their own buildings to ensure that their identity of a creative district has a solid foundation, and so that creatives can prosper and prevent gentrification, which I have to say, we see gentrification starting to occur as soon as we certify a district. So now we like to ensure that they get ahead of that with thinking and planning.
So, Margaret, you've covered many key must-dos for program implementation and for their successes, but a couple of additional thoughts include the livability sort of factor, including a good knowledge of existing amenities and plans for, or the awareness of affordable or creative makerspace and housing for artists and creatives. We would also like a demonstrated sort of cohesiveness with existing economic development and or workforce development plans in the region. And then perhaps a demonstrated ability and also willingness to track data and numbers within the district so that they are able to coherently articulate their progress to inform their future planning.
Ladies, thank you so much. We really appreciate this compelling information you shared with our attendees. Great insights, and again, really appreciate that. We did want to share your contact information and web address in case anyone on this webinar would like more information. So you can see Karen's email address and website here on the slide, and you can reach Margaret at Christy Costello's email here, and CCI's website is coloradocreativeindustries.org. I believe Christy manages the Creative District program in Colorado, so she'll be a helpful resource as well. And if you want more information on this topic or have any questions about the CVSuite data tool that was mentioned and used by both Margaret and Karen, and of course, if you'd like a demonstration of how this works, you can email cvsuite@weststaff.org, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. I think we have time for a couple questions. We do have a lot of questions from attendees. If we don't get to you today, I'm happy to reach out to everybody with questions, and I will do that in the next day or two. Karen, do you want to answer this one? What documentation of activity, particularly data points or other measures, are most compelling to track impact? How do you benchmark your activities?
That's a great question, Susan, and again, thank you for holding this webinar. I think it's very important. So we'll be looking at things like the number of creative businesses in a district year by year. We'll be looking at things like sales tax receipts, maybe sales of original art, how many new business starts are there, how many events happen in a district. And there'll be lots more examples, but those are just a few that we know that will be of interest to us as we benchmark and track the progress and the challenges within the districts.
Great. And Margaret, one for you. How do creative districts get woven into the tapestry with Main Street designations? Who should be at the table? I really like this part. Who should be at the table when discussing when discussing creating a creative district? Is it different from a cultural district?
Well, we have several creative districts that are also designated Main Street communities, and I serve on the advisory board of the Colorado Main Street program. So we really ensure that our two programs, which are run out of different agencies in state government, are complementary programs, and we ensure that our resources for each of these two programs complement one another, just as Karen mentioned earlier, and that we're funding different programs and activities which leverage the state resources for the maximum benefit. And I think I mentioned who should be at the table when creating a creative district or discussing it. And again, it comes to leadership. And you really need people that are thought leaders in the community that represent diverse backgrounds. And as I stated earlier, creative districts and cultural districts, arts districts, they're all the same thing in our mind. It depends on what the community, how they want to identify themselves.
Great. Thank you so much. I think we're running out of time. Again, I will get back with you if you have questions. Happy to do that in the next day or two. And again, thank you, ladies, for a great conversation today. If you want more information, please email CVSuite@westaff.org. Thank you all for attending, and this concludes our webinar.